Make no mistake, TOMURA Shigaraki is the villain of My Hero Academia, no matter what All For One wants you to think. And in this video, celebrating the fact that Shigaraki finally seems to be a good place in the My Hero Academia manga, we're going to be discussing the day that Tenko Shimura became Shigaraki, going through Shigaraki's backstory, and another one of these recap videos that we're doing at the end of the year. You can check out my playlist to watch all the different videos that I've done in this style already. A lot of you guys seem to like them, so we're doing another one, and let me know if you guys want to see more. Very big Shigaraki day today, but before later on we talk about the day that Shigaraki fought the #1 hero in America, we're going to discuss his backstory, starting with how his story truly began. This story starts with a young boy named Tenko who was playing outside with all the different kids who don't exactly have their own friend group, but they all seem to gravitate towards him. Tenko had a really difficult home life, but when he was outside playing with his friends, it seemed like none of that mattered, right? A lot of the issues that he faced at home didn't follow him outside. So outside of his home, Ten was able to live a pretty happy life, playing hero with his friends and just having a good time like you're supposed to when you're growing up. Eventually though, we know that this playing was interrupted by a very tall man in a black suit wearing a hat, very similar to the figure we saw in Toya's backstory, who we know was All For One retrieving Toya's body. So a very big theory in the fandom is that All For One is actually the one who brings Tenko home. Now, upon being brought home after playing hero by a mysterious stranger, Tenko's father is in a rage. His father, Kotaro Shimura, doesn't like even the idea of heroes, and learning that his son was out there playing hero with his friends, he drags him by the collar down the hallway to his room to put him on punishment and keep him from getting out. Now in the background, Tenko's mother tries to stop this, but at this point it's very clear that Kotaro Shimura is the one that makes all the rules in this household, and no one dares to go against him. Now his father's behavior was getting really difficult for the 5-year-old Tenko Shimura to deal with, because the only rule that he imposed on the house, which I mean a lot of parents do have a lot of rules, but the only one that Kotaro Shimura placed on the house was they don't talk about or discuss or even just have anything to do with heroes. He has a long-standing feud with heroes that we're going to get into in a bit, but no one in the family is allowed to even broach the topic of heroes. And for a kid growing up in a hero society, that has to be very difficult, right? Because even in the real world, we have heroes in comic books and in stories, and your average kid is going to be going out there pretending to be Batman or Superman or, you know, just having fun and pretending. But in the world of My Hero Academia, where people actually get quirks and actually are able to be superheroes and become superheroes, I feel like it's really unfair to tell a kid, hey, you can't even pretend to be a superhero, like cut that out. But that's exactly what Tenko was going through in this home. As punishment for playing hero, Tenko had to sit outside in the yard under the tree as the rest of the family had dinner. And the mom, worried about what she claims to be Tenko's allergies, wants him to come inside, but the father isn't having it. Now this is where some of the strange things start to pick up in this story. One, apparently Tenko has some sort of allergy that is only recently starting to get worse. But at the same time, we learn that the father has been getting much more strict lately, and he's also been getting worse. Just keep that in mind because we're going to discuss the nature of Tenko's sickness in a bit, but that is something that I think is very important to keep in mind. Now we also learned that at this point, Tenko hasn't actually manifested his own quirk, even though he's the age of 5. In the world of My Hero Academia, we're told explicitly that quirks should be out by the age of 4 at the latest. So it's very strange for Tenko to not have a quirk here yet, especially considering that he would go later on to develop the decay quirk, and it sort of throws the natural nature of him having his own quirk completely into question, especially if you remember earlier that a lot of people theorized that All For One was the person that brought Shigaraki home. Now it doesn't seem like everyone really likes the way that Kotaro is acting towards Tenko, but he says, hey, look, my son is 5 and he doesn't have a quirk and he still wants to be a hero. So if we don't make him understand that that's impossible, really it's going to be him who suffers, kind of trying to do some like weird twisted rigmarole dad logic. It's at this point that we learn that Kotaro built a 2-family home with the wealth that he accrued from a young age and eventually asked his parents to move in with him, where they lived upstairs and he lived in the downstairs apartment. And normally this would be a good thing, right? But Tenko feels like this entire house was built specifically to deny him, because that's all that anyone in this house is able to do when it broaches the topic of him becoming a hero. Now again, we have Tenko's mother applying ointment to his face because he keeps scratching at his face and itching at his face, and they still don't know what's wrong with him. him. But this is where my theory comes in about the true nature of Tenko Shimura's itch. Now later on we're going to find out that All For One thinks that it's all due to bloodlust, right? That Shigaraki here, or Tenko here, was actually very bloodlusted, and that was causing his itch to happen because he had the itch to destroy due to him having a latent quirk that he hadn't yet awakened. But I definitely think that that reasoning by All For One really just fits his narrative and his story about what he thinks is going on of Tenko, or at least what he wants to be going on of Tenko for the sake of his plans. But in actuality, I think that the itch was actually a stress itch from the fact that he was being more or less abused by his family. Tenko had a very strong dream for wanting to become a hero, and his dad had a very strong dream for that not happening, right? And not even discussing heroes because of various things that have gone on in his past that we'll go on to discuss in a minute. Now we know that Tenko only really itches when he's at home, and when he's out of this house and free from this stress, he's completely fine. So I don't think it's anything in the house that he's specifically allergic to. I honestly just think it's the stress of the situation causing him to itch. And that actually, if you would have completely removed Tenko's father from this situation, he actually would have just stopped itching in general. Because again, I do think it's his father and his father's actions and the way that that spreads to everyone else in the family that is causing this itch. But Shigaraki or Tenko has been confused into thinking that this is actually his bloodlust, when really I think people denying his true will of wanting to become a hero is what makes this itch occur. And that's why later on the itch returns and even gets worse as All For One takes over Shigaraki's body and takes him further from that original goal than he's ever been. Tenko tells his mom that all the friends that he has outside tell him that when they're playing hero, he should be like All Might, comparing him to All Might in a way that's supposed to tell us that this kid did not start out evil. And I think it's actually very important that we got to see this section of Tenko's life before his quirk activated, because it's good to be able to compare it to the kind of person that All For One says he really is. We can see just from this section that that is absolutely not true. Tenko wonders if his father hates him, and the mother says he doesn't, but he wonders when he gets his quirk if he'll finally be able to become a hero and his dad will accept it. The issue is he was constantly just being berated by his father and punished by his father for having anything to do with heroes, even just playing outside. And eventually he realized no one in his family would console him and say, hey, look, no matter what he says, you can be a hero, right? His grandma, his granddad, his mom, no one was giving him that justification to say, hey, your dream isn't wrong. Until one day, his sister Hana comes up to him and she has a secret to show him. She leads Tenko into his father's office and they go into a drawer and she shows him a photo of Nana Shimura and Kotaro, just when Kotaro was much younger than even Tenko and Hana are right now looking at the photo. And this is where things start to make sense based on events that we learn later on in the series, because of course Nana Shimura had to give away her son Kotaro because of the threat of All For One. And due to that, we see that Kotaro develops a hatred for her and a hatred for heroes in general, because he feels like heroes are just people who go on to hurt their own families for the sake of strangers that they don't even know. And of course, because of the secrecy around All For One and One For All, there's just no way for Kotaro to know or really understand exactly what was going on there. But regardless, a kid wants to be with his mom, right? So anything that takes that mom away is definitely something that he's going to be angry over. And if there's no other source for the anger than your mom and you think that she abandoned you, I definitely understand the source of Kotaro's anger, but I don't agree with the way that he handles his family because of it. Tenko goes, why are you showing me this? And Hana says, look, no matter what dad says, everything's gonna be okay, because our grandma was a hero, so that means it's definitely possible for someone in our family to become a hero, even if it's just you and me together going against what he says and forming our own hero agency. We can definitely do it. So don't worry, your dream is not wrong. In fact, more than anybody, I'm cheering you on. So let's keep this a secret from dad and both become heroes together. This is the first time that we see Tenko Shimura truly happy, and if anything, he looks more like Deku here than he ever did before, with his eyes watering and just sheer pride at the fact that his grandma was a hero, and he's definitely her biggest fan now, I would probably say. Now Tenko goes out to the yard happier than he's ever been to go play with his dog, and we see that he actually has a smile on his face and he's barely itching at this point, right? He's just barely itching the side of his face, but it's nowhere near the level of itching that we saw before after his dad hit him and his mother was trying to put ointment on his face. But as Tenko picks up the ball to throw for his dog, he throws it and feels a pain or a shock in his hand, with some red energy being what signifies to us, the audience, because he definitely didn't see that something has happened here. We see that the ball hits the ground and a little bit of it decays off the side. As Tenko looks at his hand and doesn't really understand what caused that pain, and he doesn't see the little bit of the ball that was decayed off. Without really having a moment to think about this is when Kotaro Shimura bursts out the back door screaming Tenko's name. "You went into my study, didn't you? You saw it!" And what seems to have happened is that somehow Kotaro figured out that Hana was in his room and had gone through his drawer, and when she was approached, she actually put all the blame on Tenko. She said that Tenko was the one that wanted to see it and he was the one that asked to see it, which was a complete lie, but that's just how kids are. They don't want to have the blame put on them, so they're really simple and they'll end up actually putting the blame on somebody else at the easiest convenience. So I understand why a lot of people would definitely be mad at Hana for doing this, but that's just kind of how things are. And this is the moment when the one person who was supporting Tenko in his dream of becoming a hero showed their true colors and abandoned him very quickly, causing Tenko to start itching from the bottom of his stomach. It's like somewhere deep down inside of him, he knew exactly what was about to happen and he'd had enough. Now we see as Kotaro grabs young Tenko by the shirt, Tenko starts itching a whole lot, kind of adding credence to that earlier theory where I feel like his dad is the only real allergy that he had. His dad says, "That's not your grandmother. That's a savage who abandoned her child." And as Tenko thinks that he wants help from his family or somebody and doesn't want them to just watch what's happening here, Kotaro lands a big, full hand, full swing slap on Tenko's face. The day goes on of us not seeing the immediate events that follow this circumstance, but we see Kotaro in his office sort of reflecting on everything that's happened so far. He reads a letter left to him from Nana Shimura back when she initially abandoned him, and she says, "Hey Kotaro, I have to go fight some really bad guys right now, and since they might be mean to you, sadly, I have to leave you, Kotaro." And we actually see on the page over his name, there's a smudge on the page from someone who's definitely been crying upon writing this letter. So we know clear as day, even as far as Kotaro can see, this was not an easy decision. This was a tearful decision made at a very desperate moment to keep him out of danger. And as he reflects on this in the very few memories that he actually does have with Nana Shimura, we see the note continue to say that, "I know one day you may hate me and I wish I could do something more motherly for you, but know that I will always love you. No matter what happens, Kotaro, I love you. And I hope your life is going to be full of smiles and that you'll be happy, even if I'm not there to see it." And we know that sadly, Nana Shimura was defeated by All For One and killed, and that is exactly what led to her never being able to be in Kotaro, or Tenko for that matter's, life. This is when Kotaro's family approaches him, even the grandparents at this point, which are his parents, and the wife says, "Look, I'm not following these rules anymore if you're going to be hitting our son. When I married you, you said you wanted to have a happy family." And Kotaro says this isn't what was supposed to happen. Things were never supposed to get this far. So let me just go talk to them. Let me go apologize. Where is Tenko? Where is Hana? And we see downstairs in the backyard in this punishment area, Tenko has had enough. Things have just gone too far, and at this point, Tenko feels like he hates everyone in his family. And as he holds on to his dog crying in this corner, we see that Mon completely decays away into a pool of blood. Completely confused and scared at what just happened, Tenko jumps back in fear. But it's at this moment that Hana comes out and starts apologizing to Tenko, saying that she's sorry about lying on him to their dad. But Tenko, unable to speak, completely just shocked at what he just saw happen to his dog, is unable to tell Hana exactly what's going on. Now, Hana, of course, sees the remains of Mon on the ground, and she screams in panic, like anybody obviously would at that age, and starts running back into the house to go get her parents, not sure what happened to the dog or if Tenko was the one who did this, but at that moment, Tenko doesn't want to be alone because he also doesn't know what's going on here, but he can't talk or communicate to get Hana to stay outside, so he reaches out to her, grabbing her from the back of the dress, but sadly, at that moment, Hana then crumbles away right in front of him, right in front of his eyes. His sister crumbles into a puddle of blood and dust. And Tenko's reaction is horrifying, but he still has no idea what's going on. In his head, at this moment, he thinks it's some sort of villain's fault that this is happening. And he is right to a certain extent, because if All For One was the one that gave him the decay quirk when he brought him home earlier this day, then this actually is all a villain's fault. And even if not, this situation was only possible because All For One wanted to kill Nana Shimura so badly that she had to give up her family, and it led to all these events here. So in a roundabout way, no matter what, it's all For One's fault, but Shigaraki Shigaraki, of course, is the one who's told to take the blame here later on. But it's at the moment where Tenko's mom and grandparents come outside where Tenko starts to realize exactly what's going on here. Deep down, he knows what he's doing and that his quirk has activated, and he puts his hand on the ground looking at his grandparents and mother who always protect his dad as the wave of decay continues to spread forward. Now, as the ground starts to rumble and break apart because it's all being destroyed around the area surrounding the house, we see Tenko's mother actually walking forward as she breaks apart, trying to reach out to her son. And as she tries to hug him to comfort him and finally turn the tables on how this family has been going, she also decays into dust. Kotaro starts to hear that something is going on downstairs in his house, and he makes his way downstairs and only sees a hellish scene. In front of him is Tenko in a completely destroyed yard, and the rest of the family is clearly gone. Seeing his son causing even more destruction in front of him, and the destruction even going past Kotaro and going into the house, Kotaro grabs the closest thing next to him, which I believe was a broom or something, and he swings it at Tenko as Tenko starts to get closer and closer, reaching out for his dad with his hand. And he screams at Tenko, seeming like he was trying to grab Tenko's head and push him away, but this last hit triggers the memories of all the other times that his father has hit him or done something unjust to him, and it triggers something deep inside of Tenko's mind that gives him the pure intent to kill his father. He lunges forward, grabbing his father by the head and screams, "Die!" As with both of his hands, he releases a massive wave of decay that goes on to crumble the entire household. And it was at that moment, once there was no one left to deny who he truly was, that Tenko Shimura's itch finally went away. But we know that's not actually where things ended. From here, we know that Tenko Shimura wandered the town that he lived in and realized that no one in this society full of scum is gonna help him, even though he clearly is in need of it. Everyone just thinks that eventually a hero is gonna come, even though no one comes to save Tenko. It's at this point where the story starts to come together, and we see that eventually All For One finds Tenko Shimura, taking him in as the only person who offered him any sort of help. And eventually Tenko Shimura is given the hands of his various different family members, and he's crafted into the villain Shigaraki TOMURA, with the name Shigaraki coming from All For One because All For One says that this is his real last name. And over the next few days and the next few years, All For One really enables the hatred inside of Shigaraki's heart, telling him that the itch actually came from him wanting to kill his family so bad and him wanted to use his quirk to decay, so he shouldn't go against that. He should do exactly what his heart is telling him to do, and he should just use his quirk freely because nothing he does is wrong. This is really, really awful by All For One, and this level of manipulation just isn't okay. But eventually we see that Shigaraki can't really contain his bloodlust anymore, and he even decays one of the hands that previously belonged to one of his family members. Eventually we see that this hand is replaced by a mysterious other hand that All For One just apparently had lying around, and in the story it's very, very heavily implied that this is actually Nana Shimura's hand, meaning that oddly enough it seems that All For One and the doctor had access to Nana Shimura's body after her death, and I wonder if that goes for the other One For All users. Now eventually Shigaraki would go on to be tested again and again by various different people in the world of My Hero Academia, but one day he would truly become Shigaraki TOMURA the villain after finally being recognized by Gigantomachia and the rest of the League of Villains as their leader by his defeat of Redestro, the leader of the Meta Liberation Army. And this defeat was only possible because Shigaraki remembered his origin and where he came from and finally accepted the way that things were and everything that happened, enabling him to awaken his quirk into its original true strength so that he could get the win over Redestro by completely decaying a large section of the city of Deka and costing Redestro his legs through his liberation. Now the reason that Redestro gives Shigaraki the Meta Liberation Army is because he realizes in this moment Shigaraki actually more so embodies the nature of what it truly means to be a member of the Meta Liberation Army or even a leader, because there's no one freer than him right now on the battlefield with the way that he uses his quirk. And since the original laws of the Quirk Liberation Army were all about just using your quirk and being able to use your quirk without restriction, he feels like Shigaraki is actually the perfect leader, and he realizes, why am I fighting this guy? I like him. So we know that after this, Shigaraki is given control of the entire Meta Liberation Army, and he would then go on to form the Paranormal Liberation Front. And it's because of all of this that Shigaraki did eventually become the perfect vessel for All For One, and he was given access to the final fruit of the Nomu program, the Body Enhancement Quirk Surgery, all to make him ready for All For One the quirk. Now eventually eventually we saw that getting All For One and everything that happened to Shigaraki on behalf of the villains was actually not a good thing, because eventually it would just kind of serve to give his body over to All For One. But if you go check out my My Hero Academia chapter 377 video, I discuss how Shigaraki Tomura has finally evolved, possibly beyond the need for All For One itself. So again, I really wanted to do this video celebrating the day that Tenko Shimura became Shigaraki, especially because it seems like we might finally have Shigaraki back. Now, the next video you might be able to expect on this channel, if I do get it finished today, is going to be the day that Shigaraki Tomura met America's #1 hero, also known as the strongest hero in the world right now, Star and Stripe. We're going to be cataloging this battle and going over everything that happened, so keep your eyes peeled on the channel and check back a little later in the day, or just subscribe and turn notifications on so you get those, and I'll see you guys later. Please like this video to keep it in the algorithm, and let me know if you liked it in the comment section below. And yeah, hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year's, and hopefully I'll see you again before the year ends. This is Pineapple. Love you guys. Peace.